bring that energy in.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Healthy Living School's weekly Ask Dr. Ann live stream. So for those that don't know me, I am Dr. Ann and I'm delighted to be with you, those that are tuning in live and those that are going to listen to this later. Thank you all so much. My areas of expertise and passion are food, nutrition, healthy living, and I love answering questions related to my expertise. We always have people that submit questions ahead of time. And so I'm going to start with those. And I've got my wonderful right hand woman to read the questions. And sometimes I read them so fast, no one can understand what I'm saying. So, Zoe, if you can go ahead and go with the first question, I'd be happy to answer it. So, Zoe, I can't hear you. So I'm thinking that other people can't hear you.
Okay, let's see. I'm getting a little reverberation.
Now I can hear you.
All right, so the first question says, what are the benefits of walking in the woods, like forest bathing?
Benefits of walking in the woods like forest bathing. So I'm a huge advocate of exposure to nature. In fact, in my opinion, nature is the best kept secret to better health. She is perhaps the safest and the most powerful, other than food, prescription of all. So, what do we know about nature, exposure, and health? First of all, the data, there's literally hundreds, if not well over 1,000 studies published in the last 20 years looking at getting out in nature and natural elements and positive beneficial effects in us and across the board. Broad, sweeping effects. What's doing it? That's what to me is so incredibly exciting. So nature is just filled with all sorts of active ingredients. Things like, first of all, sunlight. We get vitamin D from sunlight, but it's way more than that. Sunlight is how we maintain our all-important circadian rhythm. Sunlight boosts our focus, our concentration. It lifts our mood. It lowers our blood pressure. And again, in addition to giving us vitamin D, trees, particularly evergreen trees and larger trees, will produce negative air ions, as does moving water. And negative air ions have sort of a favorable effect on the immune system. They can boost your mental well-being. Then we have phytoncides. So plants, trees liberate these compounds. Think of them kind of like phytochemicals that ultimately they're protecting the trees from various environmental insults. And these same phytoncides, we now know, we breathe them in. They impact us. They have favorable impacts. Again, immune system, decreasing inflammation, lifting our moods. We have fractal visual patterns. We have sounds in nature. Anyway, the point being is there are all sorts of active ingredients in nature that have direct physiologic biochemical impacts positively on us. And people that spend more time in nature do tend to live longer, get less chronic disease, right? So I encourage you to get out in nature as much as possible. There have been some studies done to try to look at like, well, what is a good goal to aim for to optimize nature for benefiting health. And the last study I read, there are not that many that have looked at this, was like try to accumulate a couple of hours a day. And so you may not know this, but one of my passions besides healthy living and wellness, and it fits along with that, is getting out in nature. So land conservation is my civic passion. I do a lot of work in that area. And in fact, on that subject matter, I am going to be creating a course, Nature, the Best Kept Secret to Better Health, that will launch likely next fall. Um, because of my devotion to land conservation and taking care of ecology. Anyway, so I hope that encourages everyone to get out in nature because it's great for us. Zoe, next question.
Okay. Can you get some of those same benefits from an essential oil diffuser?
So one of the, again, it's kind of like phytoncides. Plants will liberate these volatile organic compounds like essential oils, right? These things that people are used to that have these wonderful odors that we breathe in that have an impact favorably oftentimes on our physiology. So to diffusers are taking advantage of one of many things you can get from nature. Again, so what you're getting in the diffuser is you're getting these volatile essential oils that again can have favorable impacts on us, boosting well-being, maybe affecting our immune system, making us feel more calm. And there's different ones. But if you just do a diffuser, you're just tapping into one of what it of what 10 or 10 plus. There are probably many things in nature we have yet to discover that are really good for us. So fine with a diffuser, but man, there's nothing better than getting out in the real thing too.
Okay, so this follower says, we enjoyed the frozen salmon patties and cauliflower crust roasted vegetable pizza from Costco. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I'm a huge advocate of the frozen salmon burgers that are available at Costco. I've talked about it many, many times. I have my sort of Costco love list, and they are definitely on there in a prominent way. What I love about those salmon burgers that you can get from Costco is it's wild salmon. They are very real food based, meaning when you look at the ingredients, they're largely ingredients you could have in your home. Um, and they're super, super convenient. This, I mean, is maybe probably the most convenient way to tap into a big dose of those precious, vital, essential omega-3 fats. And we have salmon burgers kind of as our go-to in the weekend. We want to lunch really fast. I typically do them for lunches, not my dinners. I like to make my dinners a little bit more from scratch. So I think they're fabulous. And regarding the veggie cauliflower crust pizza, I can't say that I've scrutinized the ingredients list of that yet. I would imagine it would get a check mark in my book. But what I would encourage this particular follower to do is look at the ingredients list and say to yourself, first of all, are they largely real food based ingredients? Things that you know what they are, they're real foods. You could have those in your kitchen. In fact, do that for all the ingredients. And if the answer is yes, then it's going to be fine. So that's the lens you want to look at in terms of deciding is this a real food, right? Because there are foods that are packaged that are largely real food based that are totally fine, right? And what you do is you simply look at the ingredients list because all packaged foods by law, all boxed, all packaged, all foods that aren't coming directly from the earth, directly to you by law have to have an ingredients list, meaning if they're coming out of some sort of like, I'm going to just call it a factory. They have to have that. So just look at the ingredients list and say to yourself, could I have all those things in my kitchen? Okay. And if the answer is yes, then it should be totally fine. So, but I'll try to make a point of looking at that. And I do love cauliflower crust. I think it's delicious.
Okay. If your potassium levels are higher, what foods are good to include in your diet?
Okay, so the first thing that comes to me with this as a clinician, because I am an MD, although I don't practice clinical medicine any longer, I just do wellness, nutrition wellness. Um, this person needs to know why their potassium level is elevated because that is not normal. All right, and there are a host of things that can elevate your potassium, kidney dysfunction, medications like ACE inhibitors, ARBs. It could be the most common cause of it in a healthy person is that whoever drew their blood left the tourniquet on too long and some of their red blood cells hemolyzed, and that will make you have this spurious, meaning kind of, temporary fake hyperkalemia, which is what we call medically the term for an elevated potassium. Addison's disease, there are not a number of things, but it's not normal to have an elevated potassium. Okay, so for this person, all I can say is you need to find out why your potassium is elevated. And only when you know that will you know if there's anything you can do through diet to make that better, right? So impossible for me to answer that without knowing the reason for the elevated potassium. So I apologize, but that's the best I can do with that one. Okay.
Okay, next question. This person says they read a New York Times article that says pasta and rice may be healthier as leftovers. Here's why. What do you think?
So I haven't read the article, but I can tell you, I think I know where they're coming from, and that answer can be a yes, that is true. So for pasta, and this we have the same thing with white potatoes, and so in this case, they were talking about pasta, and they were talking about what was the second starch in that question?
Rice.
Rice. Okay. Here's what's happening. So when you take a starch like white pasta or the white of a potato or the white of a rice, and it's been cooked, and then you cool it. All right. Usually people are getting leftovers out of a refrigerator. Okay. So when you cool a starch down after cooking it, like in the refrigerator, and typically the longer it's been in there, the more you're going to have this positive thing occur. What happens is it alters the starch structure. And oftentimes you can get a bit more what we call resistant starch, which means that the glycemic response, which is how high your blood glucose goes after you take in a carb based food, is going to be lower if you've cooled a starch in the refrigerator. Typically, ideally probably at least 24 hours, all right? It's going to get more dense. And the more dense the starch is, the more difficult it is to digest. Thus, the lower your blood glucose is going to go after you eat it. So there is an element of truth to that to that statement, but I haven't read the article to see what else they may claim. Okay. And I guess the point here I'd like to say is if you really want white potatoes, if you can cook them and then refrigerate them 24 hours before you eat them, it is going to turn them into from a high glycemic food into a more medium glycemic food, and will and also give you at the same time another bonus, and that is more resistant starch. Resistant starch is a wonderful food for feeding your gut microbes. Okay, and we can see that same thing happen with pasta that's been cooled in the fridge, and with rice that's been cooled in the fridge.
Great. Okay. What are your thoughts on the plant paradox by Stephen Gundry?
Yes. So I would encourage people, first of all, if you ever see something that really is counter to what you feel is just entrenched wisdom, right? Then put your guard up, right? Um, so I will tell you that you also want to look at the credentials and credibility of whoever's saying these things, right? What is their educational background? And just having an MD is not enough. If you want to work in the world of nutrition, it almost takes full devotion to that to really master it, right? Like I got my undergraduate degree in nutrition, and I had been solely devoted to nutrition and healthy living, means nothing else I've done. Stopped my clinical work. I couldn't continue my clinical practice and devote myself properly to mastering the subject of nutrition and healthy living if I was still having clinical practice. There's just no time you just don't have time to do it, right? Anyway, so I will tell you that the information in that book um, uh, is really unfounded science. And regarding lectins, there is no evidence of any strength in humans that lectins are any issue. In fact, we have a number of studies that show that lectins have potential benefits for us. And the other thing that's important to know about lectins is, heat denatures them. And when you look at the foods that provide them the high amounts, beans being the top, beans, legumes, There's some in whole grains. We're not eating beans raw, and it's a known thing. If you go eat a bunch of raw beans, you are going to get a stomach ache, and that stomach ache is coming from the lectins. But even a little bit of heat is going to denature those lectins. All right, so that's kind of a, you know, right, that one thing right there is an illogical argument to say that, oh my gosh, beans are filled with lectins, the lectins can have these problems. Well, once we cook our beans, they're really negligible lectins in there. I think the other important thing to note is, okay, what do we, when we look at the data on people that regularly consume beans and legumes, and all the data, observational data, clinical trial data, you name it, we see incredibly positive results in these studies. And I always like to reference when I get this question about lectins, the dangers of lectins, look at the blue zone. So the blue zones are the areas around the globe that have the healthiest, longest living people. And there are 5 designated blue zones. And they're, again, all across the globe, Coins in Costa Rica, the Okinawans in Japan. Anyway, there are 5 or 6 different ones. And when we look at their diets, there's lots of differences, but there are definitely commonalities. Definitely commonalities. And one of the biggest ones is they all eat lots of legumes, to the tune of the average blue zone inhabitant consumes a cup a day. Now, these are the people that are living the longest and living the healthiest in our current times, or in recent current times, right? So that pretty much goes against that. And I would imagine if someone consumes foods that, supposedly have lectins in them in their raw form, and they have an untoward effect, it's most likely something else in there, right? Because a lot of people have or many people can have problems, at least gut-wise, temporarily with FODMAPs. So these are more difficult to digest carbohydrates that can be in some of these foods. So I would disregard the information in that particular book.
Okay. The same person says they also read a New York Times article about time-restricted eating being debunked for weight loss.
Okay.
What are your
All
thoughts?
right. Great. So great question. So I'm a huge advocate of time-restricted feeding for a host of reasons. The preponderance of data, okay, maybe not every single study, but the preponderance, you always have to look at the totality of the data, definitely suggests that it is helpful for weight loss, but not in a huge way. It's very modest what you can expect from time restricted feeding if you're not making any other changes on the weight loss front. But again, it is one of the most consistent things we see is it does help people lose weight. And we know the mechanisms. There are a number of ways that it appears to do that. Or we know the potential mechanisms. But more so than that, I'm an advocate of time restricted feeding because if the human body does not get 12 hours without food most every day, then it's almost a virtual guarantee that damage is going to accumulate because our bodies need rest from food. And it is when our bodies are in this quiescent state, food has not come in for a significant window of time. And again, we see that it's at least 12 hours, that in that resting period, our organs of metabolism, that's going to be our liver and our muscle tissue and our fat tissue and our pancreas. These are critically important metabolic organs. They are in that quiescent phase where food has not come in. They are re-equilibrating, recalibrating, detoxing, healing, regenerating, renewing. And if you're taking in food beyond this 12-hour period of time, you are simply, first of all, you're weakening your circadian rhythm, and you're not giving your body the time it needs to detox and re-equilibrate and heal. And when we look at time restricted feeding and the benefits it offers beyond weight loss, decrease in pain, people report a much improved sleep, people report feeling more energized, right? There's all kind of studies on time restricted feeding. I mean, there's so many studies now. Anyway, so I'm a huge, huge advocate of it. And if people want to shift the window down to 10 hours for their feeding and versus 12, then because they want to improve metabolic health and lose weight, then that can be very, very helpful. But really, unless someone has to eat for some medical reason beyond a 12-hour window, everyone, no matter what their weight, no matter what their health status, should be limiting their eating to a 12-hour window. Because if you're not, your circadian rhythm is going to get disrupted, it's going to get weakened, and you're not giving your body the time it needs in this quiescent phase to re-equilibrate and heal.
Great. Okay. This next person says, is red wine healthy? There's a lot of conflicting information out there. How much red wine is too much?
Okay, so let's just talk about alcohol first, because I think that's the most important thing for people to know. So, alcohol, which is going to include spirits, so liquor and beer and wine. And now we have all these, liquor and or alcohol based, there's energy drinks, there's all kind of other beverages that have alcohol in them now. Anyway, the alcohol itself is not healthy, period, the end. And there was a period of time, for a long time, that we felt pretty strongly scientifically that um, consuming small amounts of alcohol, like one drink a day, um, had benefits for cardiovascular health, maybe some benefits metabolically. Well, and we, basically kind of, I won't say preach that, but that was kind of the ongoing scientific dogma for, a long time. Well, in the last few years, that information has kind of been kind of turned on its head a little bit. And it looks like at this point in science, we can't say that there really is any amount of alcohol that is good for you or really safe, right? And that this new information has actually changed my drinking habits. So I have I've never been a big drinker, but I don't drink anything at all in the weekdays. And I, even on the weekends, I've cut back what I drink. Um, so as long as you don't have a medical condition in which alcohol has been prohibited, because there are a lot of those, right? And you want to, have consume alcohol in moderation. I don't want you to think it's good for you, okay? Because we don't have the science to say that. But it appears that the best choice would be red wine, because red wine, yes, it has the alcohol that is the ingredient that we think has these, that we know has all these untoward effects, cancer, elevating blood pressure, promoting addiction, interfering with your sleep, on and on and on. Red wine does have very, very high doses of beneficial phytochemicals, polyphenols, that, that are coming from the skin of the grapes, right? Because red wine is fermented with the skin, and the skin is high in these polyphenols. They have anti-inflammatory power, antioxidant power. They have favorable effects on the gut microbiome. Anyway, so if you're going to drink in moderation, and even the risk of doing that, and you're looking for the wisest choice, then red wine is going to be what it is. And it's worth listening to this. If you've never checked out the Uberman Lab podcast, this is Dr. Uberman, who is a Stanford neuroscientist and a neuro-ophthalmologist. He's a PhD, he's not an MD. But he's got an amazing podcast, and he goes into great, great detail in his podcast. They're usually 2.5 hours, and usually are focusing on one particular topic. And his topic on alcohol, when he covered alcohol, was quite illuminating. And listening to that definitely changed my alcohol consumption habits. And one thing he said, and he said the data is very clear, is that consuming more than 2 alcoholic beverages a week will elevate your baseline cortisol level. Cortisol is your stress hormone, and will elevate your baseline cortisol level. It's baseline. Baseline is where you're living. So that means 24/7, your cortisol, because you've had more than 2 drinks in a week, is going to be higher than it otherwise would. So that, I mean, that was enough for me right there. I have plenty of other, sources of an elevated cholesterol, and I don't want to add to those in my life anyway. So those are my feelings on, and that's my reply to that. Zoe, thank you.
Okay, next question says, I don't eat fish or seafood. What are some alternates for protein and omega-3?
Okay, let's talk about alternates for omega-3 first. So, omega-3 fats, this is an essential fat. Many people, probably most Americans, are not getting optimal amounts of these wonderful long chain omega-3 fats, specifically DHA and EPA. And the reason is because they're just not in hardly any foods. And the food sources that give you those, the only food sources that give you those long chain, those are the ones your body can use and requires. The body can use them immediately. Those are the ones your body must have, critically important for heart health, brain health, decreasing inflammation. You can only get those long chain omega-3 fats from seafood, right? There are plant-based sources of omega-3 that we know have benefits, but the problem is the plant-based source of omega-3, their conversion to the biologically active human forms is very inefficient. All right. So um, I'm a huge advocate for making sure people are getting adequate amounts of DHA and EPA, and the only way you can do that through food is with oily fish, salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, herrings, lake trout. There's small, modest amounts in other forms of seafood, particularly oysters, shrimp, clams, things like that. And if you can't do that, then I think you need to be supplementing with either a algae-based form of DHA, and that would be appropriate if you're vegan or vegetarian, or you can do a high-quality fish oil supplement, right? And what I personally do is on days I don't consume oily fish, and I try to get oily fish at least two, if not three servings plus a week. Then I'm going to take uh, some high quality fish oil. Uh, so that's the answer for the omega-3. And then it would be valuable to know, even though the plant based sources of omega-3 can't really replace DHA and EPA, it's valuable to know what foods provide them. So it's going to be, there's some in whole soy foods, dark leafy greens, flax, chia, hemp seeds, walnuts. So it can be helpful to include a lot of those foods, and those foods are super good for you. But you all are also going to need to supplement, in my opinion, if you're not going to do oily fish and seafood. And back to the question related to protein, there's a bajillion of sources of high quality protein besides fish and seafood. And so plant based proteins are fantastic. That's whole soy foods, that's nuts and seeds, and that's beans and legumes. They are extraordinary. And then you have all the other sources of proteins that you can do, right? So we have poultry and maybe in some eggs and uh, fermented dairy products like yogurt and kefir. I'm a huge fan of those things. Um, anyway, so, and most Americans are getting plenty of protein. It's really rare to not get enough protein living in America. And the people that typically aren't are going to be the elderly who have really restrictive eating habits because of some sort of issue. Um, maybe they don't, know how to fix their food, or maybe they have problems with consuming the food. Um, they have a diminished appetite, right? So there are a host of reasons that sometimes in the elderly demographic we do see some protein deficiency, but the average American is consuming probably double the amount of protein they need, right? So,
Okay, great. The next question says, my diabetic partner loves sweets. If he has chosen to drink sugar-free beverages, will taking a probiotic offset the negative impact to his microbiome?
okay, first thing I'm going to say here is we need to get your diabetic partner to break a sweet tooth, because those two things are a deadly combination. So, diabetic, and I'm assuming it's a type 2 diabetic, that is a largely lifestyle-based driven disease. And when you have diabetes, you cannot do sugar. You need to be broken of that. And all taste is malleable. Taste buds can be rehabilitated and get to where they don't crave sugar and want sugar and that sort of thing. So that would be my biggest advice to him. And getting to this concept of sugar substitutes, I've never been an advocate of sugar substitutes ever, 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 and I'm sure I never will. Um, and in terms of the reasons why, first of all, when we look at the data, people are typically using them for weight control or to avoid sugar and because sugar is bad and it leads to weight gain, blah blah blah. Well, we don't see any evidence long term that people that use them have better success with weight control. In fact, we see the opposite. We see that people that tend to use them regularly tend to gain more weight over time. Now, that doesn't prove cause and effect, but they've done lots of studies looking at this. And there are a whole host of mechanisms that have, um, been illuminated in studies whereby using these things can actually work against us in terms of, for example, one is setting the bar for what tastes sweet for your taste buds really, really high, and sort of driving a sweet tooth, right? Increasing cravings for sweetened foods, getting less satisfaction from foods that don't have sugar in them. The other thing we see is all of them can alter the microbiome, and some of them, when we look at the alterations of the microbiome really quickly, the alterations are what we see in people that go on to get metabolic issues like type 2 diabetes. So that's concerning to me, very concerning. And we haven't seen the microbiome alterations that we see in metabolic disease happen with all of them, but certainly with many of them. Okay. So I would tell, I don't like people to do artificial sweeteners or sugar substitutes. And I would say, no, I do not think taking a probiotic would circumvent or mitigate any adverse effects of those things on your microbiome. But I can't say I've seen a study published looking at what if we take people who are regularly using sugar substitutes and give them a probiotic, what happens? So I haven't seen those studies, but my gut is that it wouldn't do the trick, so to speak. So.
Okay, and then we have some live questions from Instagram. This mother says, I have a very good eater who eats broccoli, garlic, and sauerkraut daily. Can you recommend 5 foods or so to serve young children, like toddlers, daily to avoid disease later in life? I'd love some ideas.
Oh, okay. Well, you've got so many to choose from, and I have young grandchildren, including one that's now 2, and is kind of in this phase. So just focus on brightly colored plant-based foods and a variety, right? So, the plant-based foods that have the deep orange, yellow hues, think sweet potatoes, think carrots, think winter squash, and then green vegetables, think broccoli, think dark leafy greens, any green vegetable, think Brussels sprouts. There's bajillions of dark leafy greens. There's spinach and there's kale and there's collards and you've got lettuce greens. So you've got green and you've got your yellow oranges, and then you've got your blue, purple hues like berries, right? So my little Rivers, my grandson who's 2, just devours. It's almost a problem. My daughter, who had him, has edited all my books, so she's a master of healthy eating because she edited all of my books. She grew up with me, right, where she's just used to seeing healthy foods and eating healthy foods, and you pick up a lot of knowledge when you're because she's raised by me. And Rivers really never had sugar except like on his birthday and things like that. So for him, he begs for, it's a problem how often he wants frozen berries, because for him that's a treat. And so he's constantly like any 2-year-old, they're going to want things that are sweet, right? Anyway, so all fruits, all berries, but think about this concept of deep, rich color and color variety. So find 5 foods maybe that are from different color families that are and that have deep color to them, and use those. And their whole grains are also great. Beans are also great. I mean, it's endless. There's thousands of foods that fit the bill for being super healthy and great ones to incorporate. But I would focus on that color variety and the deep, rich color.
Okay, great. Next question. Many say you automatically lose weight when you practice time restricted eating. This did not happen to me. Can you give me reasons why?
Sure, sure. And there's never going to be anything that works for everyone, ever, ever, ever. And a few things before I give you the answer here. Time restricted feeding. One thing that I have been impressed with it with is there are a lot of people that don't have a lot of weight to lose, but they just, and maybe that's why it's kind of hard for them to lose weight, because they're not significantly overweight, but they want to lose. They want to lose, and it would be healthy for them to lose a few pounds, like 4 pounds. Those are the people that I've seen both sides. That group of people I find really, really good results with time restricted feeding. And then on the other extreme, I have as my students, because I have my online school and I have some students that I work very closely with, typically by Zoom. And I have had a number of students lose 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds. And it's not the only reason they're losing that weight. They're also making radical changes, oftentimes their diet. But several of them have said to me that they think of all things, that was the thing that helped them the most. Okay. But that said, it's not going to work for everyone. So if someone has tried that and has not had any success, let me throw this out. You want to shift that window as early in the day as you possibly can. The earlier in the day your eating window, the better it's going to be for weight control and metabolic health. So if someone is choosing like to get their first meal at 12 noon and then end their eating, at 7 or 8, that is not nearly as good as, ending your eating at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. In fact, that is one thing I definitely have observed. The people that I have worked with that have had huge success with weight loss and have involved TRE are ending their eating early. Okay. And this makes perfect sense. That is because metabolism is highest in the day. And as the day goes on, particularly afternoon, it just starts going down, 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 down. And our ability to burn calories at 7 or 8 at night, and the later you get, the worse it is significantly worse and less than that same time 12 hours earlier. Okay. And so for this person that didn't have success with TRE, perhaps, I don't know which window you chose. I would definitely tell someone that wants to lose weight, they should go down to 10. If you could do not 8 or 9, even short term, that can be helpful, and to shift that window up. And you need to know that any calories count. So if you're having some coffee with creamer in it, that is counting as breaking your fast. So that's another common mistake people make. I mean, it can be no calories. You can have any calories until your window begins. Not a sip, not a bite, none, 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 none. And then, so think about those things. But the other thing for this person, if assuming they did all those things, they had done that, and they had an early window and they weren't taking in any calories except in their eating window, then I would say they may want to get their thyroid checked. That can be a big reason that you can have difficulty losing weight even when you try. Then the other thing is perhaps they have background insulin resistance, and insulin resistance can be an impediment to weight loss, and that is basically the medical term we use for slowed down metabolism, metabolic dysfunction, typically because there's excess weight, poor diet choices, not enough physical activity, poor sleep, too much stress. Um, and so, you're going to have to either tweak your how you did it, or you're going to have to add something to it, like change the qualitative um, aspects of the food you're eating, right? So, can you eat more whole real foods, particularly a lot of plants, thinking about trying to get a lot of fiber. Fiber is, Mother Nature's diet pill is extraordinary for helping you lose weight. And speaking of this, my course release in January is going to be focused on healthy, sustainable weight loss. And
Somebody just asked regarding the artificial or calories within the time restricted feeding.
uh
Um, that does stevia, even though it has 0 calories, count for
I,
adding?
I would worry that it's going to tell your body that food has come in, and that's what you want to avoid. Even though it doesn't have calories, it does have taste. We know there's receptors for sweet taste even in the gut. My concern is that it would kind of activate um, that your body could perceive that as food coming in, and that it may work against you. And, again, have I seen published clinical trials looking carefully at this? I have not. I have heard the experts in these scientific experts in these feeding practices share my same kind of concerns, that there is a theoretical concern that they may be interpreted in the body as calories coming in.
Okay, great. And this person asks about alternate oils, but then specifies what are the best oils to use.
Right. It's really straightforward. So, extra virgin olive oil, hands down, is the healthiest oil, and it is a really, really blockbuster healthy food, because it's very rich in monounsaturated fats that have all sorts of favorable benefits: cardiovascular health, metabolic health, brain health. They've been associated with some benefits there. And their extra virgin olive oil, one of the things that really makes it unique is very, very high in phytochemical polyphenols. And these are these wonderful, wondrous compounds that are housed in plants that have really amazing effects in us. They help our microbiome. They can turn on, anti-aging genes. They can turn on genes for making your brain cells grow. They have anti-inflammatory power, antioxidant power, all sorts of neat things. And so we love extra virgin olive oil for that reason. It's also really pretty darn heat tolerant. It can tolerate temperatures up to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which, so you can use in the oven. And at top of the stove, rarely you're going to even begin to reach those kind of temps, unless you're like super deep frying kind of stuff. Then beyond that, if you don't want the flavor of extra virgin olive oil, which sometimes in a culinary preparation or something you're cooking, you might not want that flavor, right? Because it does have a strong flavor. Then you would want to go with a more neutral tasting monounsaturated oil, which you could do canola oil. And if you do canola, I would do expeller pressed canola oil, because otherwise it's going to be GMO, and I don't like GMO foods. And then another alternative would be avocado oil. So those are both monounsaturated fats. And please do not be confused by all of this, like just complete or just crazy stuff on the internet about seed oils. And just don't even forget that term. It's not a term that we use scientifically. We categorize their fats based on their saturation. Are they polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, or are they saturated fats?
Okay, great. Those are all of our questions for today.
Great, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining me. And I'm going to, again, my goals are to try to do this every week. Um, and I love answering your questions. I get questions all the time, and this has now given me a way to efficiently and effectively answer them and get them back to you, versus like, sorry, there's no way I can type that answer out and answer all these individual questions that come. It takes me a lot longer to do this than it does to do this. So we're grateful for your questions, and we're always here for you. Thank you.